Good morning, friends, and welcome to worship at St. Andrew. I'm Justin Bullis, and it is my privilege to welcome you here today from the St. Andrew Sanctuary. I am grateful, as always, to share this sacred online space with you, where we are all invited, included, and valued as vital and beloved members of our broader worshiping community. Please take a moment to visit gostandrew.com/sign-in to let us know that you're here and to share some information about yourself. We'd love to know from where or from when you happen to be joining us, or if you have any prayer requests or questions about our church. If you would like to explore deeper engagement with the work God is doing in and through the St. Andrew community, you can email us directly at connect@gostandrew.com. We would love to hear from you. Be sure to check out the announcement slides at the beginning and end of this video to see some upcoming events and opportunities to get more involved in the St. Andrew community. You can also visit the events page on our website to see an updated events calendar. Lastly, if you would like to contribute a financial gift to the work and ministry of St. Andrew, you can visit gostandrew.com/give or text St. Andrew to 28950. As Reverend Mark reminds us every week, St. Andrew is an open, affirming, inclusive congregation that welcomes all people into the full life and communion of our church. This includes saints and sinners, believers and skeptics, the lost and the found, the wanderers and the wanderers, families of all shapes and sizes, and people from every point along life's journey. No matter who you are or where you've been, no matter what you believe or even if you believe anything at all, you are welcome here and you belong here. So now let's listen together as Reverend Mark brings us the latest sermon in our current preaching series, Would You Be Mine?
Luke 14:7-14. When he noticed how the guests chose the places of honor, he told them a parable. When you are invited by someone to a wedding banquet, do not sit down at the place of honor, in case someone more distinguished than you has been invited by your host, and the host who invited both of you may come and say to you, "Give this person your place." And then in disgrace you would start to take the lowest place. But when you are invited, go and sit down at the lowest place, so that when your host comes, he may say to you, "Friend, move up higher." Then you will be honored in the presence of all who sit at the table with you. For all who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. He said also to the one who had invited him, "When you give a luncheon or a dinner, do not invite your friends or your brothers and sisters, or your relatives or rich neighbors, in case they may invite you in return, and you would be repaid. But when you give a banquet, invite the poor, the crippled, the lame, and the blind, and you will be blessed because they cannot repay you, for you will be repaid at the resurrection of the righteous."
We've been talking lately about loving our neighbors, the people who live next door, across the street, around the block. What does it look like to love our neighbors, not just in principle, but in practice? And what would our neighborhoods look like if we actually took Jesus seriously when he said that our salvation is directly tied to loving our neighbor? You remember that teaching, right? A man asks Jesus, "What must I do to inherit eternal life?" And Jesus says, "What does your Bible say?" The man says, "Love the Lord with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself." And Jesus says, "Do this and you will live." What would our neighborhoods actually look like if we loved our neighbors as if our very lives, our eternal life, depended on it? Some people have that proverbial image in their minds of standing at the gates of heaven and meeting St. Peter, who's sitting there behind his big corporate-looking desk. He has a clipboard and a pen. He's asking a series of highly consequential questions. I'm not suggesting it works this way, but if it turns out that that's really how it does work, what questions is St. Peter going to ask? I know a lot of Christians expect Peter to ask questions like, do you believe in the virgin birth? Do you believe in the atonement? Do you believe dinosaurs were real? Do you believe we let Gandhi in here even though he's not a Christian? Well, shockingly, Jesus says none of those questions will be on the final exam. If St. Peter really is asking questions at the pearly gates, we better be prepared to answer this one question. Did you love your neighbors? And of course, we will say yes. But before we assume that we have passed the test, Peter will ask us one more question that will prove whether we really did love our neighbors. That question will be, what are their names? And we might be in serious trouble at that point, because isn't it hard to love and know all of our neighbors? Do you love your neighbors? Do you know their names, their needs, their hurts, their hopes? Most of us honestly don't. We're living in this age of unprecedented social isolation. Epidemiologists, psychiatrists, public health officials, social scientists, they all agree the number one health crisis in America today isn't cancer. It's not obesity or heart disease. It's loneliness. Loneliness. This perception that we're all alone. This feeling that we have no one. 1 in 5 Americans today report that loneliness is a major source of unhappiness in their lives. 1 in 3 over the age of 45 report that chronic loneliness is a fundamental challenge for them. And 2 in 3 teenagers and young adults report feeling lonely either much of the time or all the time. Loneliness is killing us. And studies show that meaningful social relationships are second only to genetics in predicting health and longevity in humans. Persistent loneliness reduces average longevity by as much as 3 years. On Christmas Day, 2014, a newspaper reported the startling details of a 63-year-old woman who had been found dead in her garage. Her name was Sunantha Simmons. She lived alone in a quiet neighborhood in southern Illinois. Her body was discovered by her stepdaughter, who had traveled all the way from Japan after repeated attempts to contact her stepmother had failed. When she arrived at her stepmother's home, she found an overgrown lawn, dozens of packages on the front porch, an overstuffed mailbox. The coroner reported that Simmons had been dead for more than a year. One neighbor said he mowed her lawn periodically just to keep the neighborhood looking good. Another reported that she had lost touch with Simmons when Simmons began showing signs of depression after the death of her husband. The antidote to loneliness is knowing and being known by our neighbors. The assurance that there are people who surround us, are with us, are for us, are looking out for us. And social psychologists tell us that we have an instinctive human need to belong. It's one of the most universal and basic of human needs. To be accepted as a member of a group, to belong to something greater than ourselves, to give and receive affection from others, belonging. It's not only an instinctive need, but a culturally conditioned one. Our earliest ancestors on the savannas knew thousands of years ago what we now know in the modern world. To survive, to thrive, it's essential to find our place in the pack. Do you remember that need for belonging as a child? That moment on the playground when all the kids are picking teams and you don't really care which team picks you, just that you are picked and not picked last. Do you remember the cool kids table in the cafeteria? Do you remember how in high school your whole life seemed to be defined by which group you belonged to? The jocks, the bandies, the geeks, the goths, the skaters, the hipsters. We all have this inherent, incessant need to find our place in the social structures of this world, to fit in. Whether we're trying out for the high school lacrosse team or pledging for the college sorority or attending a neighborhood party, We all seek and sometimes struggle to find our place. And so at an early age, we learn the social tactics of sizing people up, discerning who can help us and who's in our way, and how to work our way in and work our way up, and to do it all subtly and strategically. C.S. Lewis called this the phenomenon of the inner ring. Lewis said we all have this lifelong desire, from infancy all the way to old age, to be inside the local ring. Today we might call it the inner circle, that exclusive social circle where power, importance, and superiority are bestowed upon the select few who are included. But Lewis said that deep in our psyche is also this lifelong fear of being left outside the ring, of not belonging. He called it, quote, the lust for the esoteric, the desperate longing to be inside. And he said that while an inner ring is not necessarily a bad thing, whenever we become part of one, we do open ourselves to becoming what he called scoundrels. And what he meant by scoundrel is simply a person who lives without authenticity. Someone who can't be himself because others expect him to conform to the group. Someone who can't speak up because she's expected to agree with the prevailing view. Someone who cannot say no because everyone else in the inner ring is saying yes. You know how it works. Someone tells a lie or stretches the truth, and you know it's wrong, but do you dare speak up? Someone cuts a corner, fudges some numbers, bends the rules, and says, yeah, but this is what we do. And just the mention of the word we says that you're in. But do you want to be? The drive to belong can bring out the best in us. AA groups, scouting, support groups, business and leadership groups, churches and service groups, these can help us become more authentically human by reminding us of our inherent worthiness. But this drive to belong can also rob us of our authenticity. If the inner ring becomes the sole source of our sense of worthiness, we get in trouble. Think of the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, hate groups, conspiracy groups, terrorists, and white supremacy groups. What draws people to these toxic inner rings? Almost always, it's a shattered or disfigured sense of self, an inherent sense of unworthiness, and a desperate self-loathing that seeks validation and belonging. Maybe that's why Jesus teaches us that love of neighbor begins with love of self. And maybe that's why the world is so full of hostility and hatred today. Because loving ourselves is nearly impossible when our sense of self-worth is dependent on the approval of others, or our possessions, or the public image that we project, or our job, or our achievements. To love our neighbors, we have to love ourselves, believing that God fashions us in love, calls us good, and says to us, you are accepted. Wherever you see healthy families, and healthy communities, healthy churches, healthy neighborhoods, you will find imperfect people who truly love themselves and fiercely believe in their own God-given worthiness. And to make this point, Luke tells a story about a dinner party. It's one of those parties, by the way, that you dread going to because the guest list is full of people who don't seem to love themselves very well. They're all a bunch of ladder climbers and self-promoters, schmoozers and suck-ups and shysters and strivers, all the people that C.S. Lewis meant when he described them as scoundrels. For some reason, Jesus is also invited to this party, and as all the dinner guests are arriving, Jesus stands back, And he watches each of them jockey for a place at the table. And he's amused by the games that people play. In the first century shame and honor culture, dining hierarchy was serious business. The dinner table became the fundamental symbol of social order. It revealed who's most important and who's most worthy. People were seated according to rank and status. Guests of honor were seated nearest to the host, while those at the far end of the table, furthest from the host, these were the least important and influential. And at this dinner party, Jesus is watching Elon Musk and Joel Osteen argue over who should sit at the head of the table. When Jesus interrupts them, he offers them a simple suggestion. Why don't you both just take the lowest seats and make no assumptions about yourselves, your importance, your rank, your worthiness. Instead, he said, why don't you sit down there and wait for the host to invite you to move up? You might be surprised by what you learn. Then he looks over at the host and he says to the host, the next time you throw a dinner party, don't invite all these who can return the favor. Instead, invite the poor, who won't know how much money you actually spent on the wine and the hors d'oeuvres. Invite the crippled, the disabled, who won't be jockeying over the best seats. They'll just be grateful to sit down. Invite the blind, who won't be watching the door all night to see what celebrities might be coming. Invite the lonely, who on most nights are sitting at home eating a TV dinner, watching reruns of The Golden Girls. Invite the hungry, who on most nights aren't eating anything at all. Jesus says, invite all these. It'll be a party you'll never forget, a dinner for schmucks. After that teaching, and I imagine the party guests probably fell silent. No one quite knew what to say, because they simply couldn't understand the logic of the teaching. Who in their right mind would give a gift to anyone without the expectation that it might be repaid? I mean, who doesn't keep track of how much we've done for so-and-so and who owes us a favor and who never seems to return it? Can you see all those sophisticated guests sitting at the table of honor? They're all wearing suits and ties, their elegant gowns. They're handing out business cards while comparing stock portfolios. They're hustling so hard for love, for validation, that they're just so empty. Now look way down at the far end of the table, where Jesus sits. He's surrounded by prostitutes and tax collectors, lepers and beggars, some parolees, and maybe even a couple of members of the Michigan militia, because Jesus was radical that way. And they're all having the time of their lives. Some of them are laughing so hard they're crying. Some are telling stories and silly jokes, and they're all making complete fools of themselves because, can you believe it, they're using the wrong fork for their dinner salads. And why is the end of the table so absolutely beautiful? Because in the presence of Jesus, they know who they are. They don't need to pretend to be anyone else. Because in the presence of Jesus, they know they are worthy and accepted. At which end of the table do you long to sit? At which end of the table would you most like to be the host? I know it's just one story about a dinner party, and we don't know all the facts about what all went down on the far end of that table on that evening. It's possible that it wasn't all fun and games. I mean, maybe it was a lot like even the best dinner parties that we are prone to attend in our world. You know, the kind of party where everything is going super well until that one neighbor, completely unsolicited, suddenly goes off about illegal immigration or abortion rights or Second Amendment rights, and all at once the collective blood pressure in the room spikes, and everyone clears their throat and holds their breath Even the butter hardens and the Jell-O stops jiggling. I've been at that table. I'm sure you have too. And no one wants to be there. And isn't that the state of our world right now? No one wants to be at the table. And so we just stop going to dinner parties altogether. But Jesus lived at that table. He sat at tables with zealots and Samaritans, publicans and Essenes, Herodians and Pharisees, Romans, Gentiles, Jews, soldiers, expats. Jesus set the table for all of them because he loved them all. And we hate this about Jesus, and we love this about Jesus, and we don't want or even know how to do any of all of that like Jesus without losing our minds. But if we don't do it, the only real alternative is for all of us to go hungry, to keep starving ourselves and the world for connection and community and belonging. We wrongly assume that everyone at that table just wants to be right. We forget that everyone at that table really just wants to be loved. Only sometimes they do not know how to ask for love. I don't know how to do this Jesus-y party planning thing very well. But whenever I'm at a dinner party or a neighborhood barbecue, I try to remember how Jesus did it. Jesus always made it about the bread and the cup. He remembered what the guests really needed, what they really longed and hungered for: love, belonging, acceptance, bread and wine, the ordinary means by which we share grace, like laughter, storytelling, hospitality, humility. I'm sure there were times at the table when things got heated and Jesus called time out and said, let's give it a break. All this talk about Pilate and Herod, Caesar, Rome, the occupation, high taxes, can't it all just wait? Tonight, let's just make it about us. Let's break bread, drink wine, give thanks. Whenever you plan a party, always make it about the bread and cup of Jesus. An act of communion that says, whoever you are, wherever you've come from, you are worthy. You are welcome here. David Brooks wrote about his friends, Kathy and David. They have a son named Santi, and Santi went to public schools in Washington, D.C. He had a friend who sometimes went to school hungry, so Santi invited him to occasionally eat and sleep at his house. And that friend had a friend. That friend had a friend. And now, when you go to dinner at Kathy and David's house on Thursday nights, there might be 15 to 20 teenagers crammed around that table. And these kids have all endured homelessness, hunger, abuse, assault. Almost all of them have seen death firsthand to a sibling, friend, or parent. They all call Kathy and David Mama and Dad. And every Thursday night, they turn toward one another like plants toward the sun, and they burst with big, glowing personalities. All who gather around that table are invited to share their gifts. One of the boys reads a poem that he wrote. Another sings a song. Another gives a short talk on engine repair. But the greatest gift they give to each other is their complete intolerance of social distance. Hugging is mandatory. And Brooks sums it all up beautifully when he writes, souls are not saved in bundles. Love is the necessary force. Our takeaways for today: everyone at the table just wants to be loved. Only sometimes they do not know how to ask for that. Always make it about the bread and the cup of Jesus. And remember, whoever you are, wherever you come from, you are worthy and you are welcome.
A church where freedom reigns. fire, let it come in the here and now. Your kingdom come till it rules the earth. Your will be done all around the world. Let it come in the here and now.
We love you guys. Those kids are still using that playground you helped to build and landscape. Good morning, St. Andrew congregation. I'm Meg Mullen, Chief Development Officer for the Colorado Coalition for the Homeless. For 38 years, the Coalition has worked collaboratively to prevent and end homelessness by providing housing, healthcare, and supportive services to help our most vulnerable neighbors attain stable lives, homes, health, and hope. Today, the Coalition is the state's largest developer of housing to end homelessness. Every night, more than 5,000 households have safe, stable housing because of our work. Our 5 health centers served more than 15,000 people last year, treating the physical and mental health problems that are obstacles to their stability. Through supportive programs like childcare, vocational services, community building, and specialized treatment teams, the Coalition provides the resources and supports that help people work toward recovery and become part of strong neighborhoods. St. Andrew United Methodist Congregation has been one of our critical partners in this work. Through your individual donations and your service as the St. Andrew Big Serve, you've helped make programs like Renaissance Children's Center even better for growing children and made residential properties more inviting spaces. Today, I'm asking your help with a new project. Renaissance Legacy Lofts will open in August, providing apartments to end homelessness for 98 adults. All the new residents have been homeless for months or years, and all are high utilizers of our healthcare system. As we demonstrated with the Housing First program, Legacy Lofts will show that stable housing will improve residents' health status and significantly reduce their ongoing healthcare costs. Every new resident will move in with only the items they carry. All need housewares to begin their fresh start. We're providing furniture, but still need basics like dishes, cookware, towels, and the like. We've created a list of 25 items that each apartment needs to be ready. We hope that St. Andrew will provide these housewares for 26 or more of the apartments. We also ask that you join us on Saturday, July 30th, when we set up the apartment homes and make them ready for residents. St. Andrew and the Coalition have a long partnership, and I hope we can count on you now to help 98 people move from chronic homelessness to lasting stability. I look forward to working with you. Thank you.
And now, as you return to the rhythms and routines of your busy lives this week, I leave you with this reflection from Cheryl Laurie on the Hold This Space blog. On their own, the bread and wine are nothing. To become a foretaste and a promise of love made real and a world made whole, they need a story and a blessing and a people who believe. It would not have been God's table if they hadn't all been gathered around it. The betrayer and the friend, the power-hungry and the justice-seeker, the faithful and the fickle. When Jesus poured the wine and the bread was broken, when everyone could eat, the outcast and the beloved, the arrogant and the gracious, the wrongdoer and the wrongly done by, the table became a foretaste of love, made real and of a world made whole. Your company at the table will include the betrayer and the beloved, the wrongdoer and the wrongly done by. It would not be God's table without them. And the promise is that when you are together, when you tell the story and give the blessing, when you break the bread and pour the wine, you will discover a foretaste of love made real and of a world made whole. Amen.